Tonight on the docket, the president and his broken peace promises. He's led this country blindly, unjustly, and unlawfully into a war in Libya. In fact, take a look at what then-Senator Joe Biden once said about President George W. Bush and war.
If he takes the country to war in Iraq without a vote of Congress, which will not exist, then he should be impeached.
Well, Vice President Biden, will you make it your business to impeach your boss for doing exactly that in Libya? Even so, the president was elected expressly because of his promises to undo the warfare state unleashed during the Bush years. And his campaign promises were so compelling that he won a Nobel Peace Prize at the beginning of his term as president. That, of course, put him in the illustrious company of a famous killer called Yasser Arafat, who also won that prize. This shows, for one thing, how pathetic the Nobel Peace Prize is and how the president basically lied to voters and to the world when he promised peace instead of war. Now, of course, the president is absurdly trying to claim this isn't a war in Libya. Why doesn't he ask the relatives of those who were killed by American Tomahawk missiles if this is a war? Or the families of American servicemen who might not come home if this is a war? Because they tell him the truth. This is fighting a war in Libya. And we all know how much politicians like to avoid the truth. Our next guest is one of the exceptions to that rule. He's fought valiantly to dismantle Obamacare. He's fought against the Fed's war on your money, and now against the president's war of choice in Libya. Here now, a champion of freedom, Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee. Senator Lee, welcome to Freedom Watch. I know you guys are off this week, and I appreciate very much you joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Were you surprised when the president sent bombs and bombers and American airmen over Libya, and a letter to Speaker Boehner on a weekend when he knew that the Congress was on vacation? Sort of a ridiculous, minimalist effort to comply with the War Powers Act.
I was not only surprised, I was dismayed and very, very disappointed. Look, this is the same president who just a few years ago, while serving in the United States Senate on December 20th, 2007, told the Boston Globe the president lacks the power under the Constitution unilaterally to go to war in a foreign land unless there's something about that conflict that presents a clear and present immediate threat to American national security. And yet we've got the same problem here. So separate and apart from Joe Biden's comments from a few years ago, the president's own comments betray what he's doing.
I've often argued, you've heard me make this argument, that when it comes to war, we really have one big government party. Both parties like war. I know the Congress is away this week, but have you heard a peep from Mrs. Pelosi, a peep from the anti-war left, even a peep from the Republican leadership defending the prerogatives of the Congress to decide when and under what circumstances and against whom we wage war? Because I haven't heard much from these folks.
Yeah, I haven't either. It's been pretty quiet out there. And, you know, we do have to remember that this is a big, big problem. It's not as if the president can claim that there was something so imminent, so immediate about this that he had to do this without talking to Congress first. He went, after all, to the UN Security Council. He got their go-ahead, but he didn't say a word to us. Instead, he flew to South America while ordering that these strikes begin.
Senator Lee, I think the president, metaphorically speaking, thumbed his nose at the Congress. I think he's treating you folks like you're potted plants, because he not only had time to go to the UN Security Council, he had time to go to NATO. He had time to go to the Arab League. No one could seriously argue that what's happening in Libya is a threat to American security. What's happening to Bahrain, where they sell more oil to us than Libya, is more of a threat to the United States. And yet, while the Congress was on vacation and while he was in Brazil, he sends the bombs over and says it's not a war, so I didn't have to comply with the War Powers Act. Question, if he's killing people, isn't it a war no matter what he calls it?
Yes. Look, this is a war. This is analogous at a minimum to a naval blockade historically, which arguably would have been considered an act of war. But in addition to a blockade, in establishing a no-fly zone, you have to go in, you have to take out some of their anti-aircraft infrastructure, and there's killing going on. That is an act of war. It is Congress's power to declare war, and with good reason. Declaring war and undertaking acts of war have really serious ramifications in all 50 states. Our brave young men and women are being sacrificed. We ought to at least have the opportunity to debate and discuss this before sending them into a theater of war.
Under the Constitution, as you know, as you just stated, You know this better than most people in the country. Only the Congress can declare war. In 1973, in an effort to restrain President Nixon, who invaded Cambodia without telling anybody, the Congress enacted the War Powers Act. It still contemplates that the president will only wage these small wars for 60 or 90 days when there's a serious threat to American national security and when the Congress has been consulted. Do you think he did this intentionally on a week when he couldn't consult the Congress because they were spread to the four corners of the earth, literally, while on their spring break?
You know, I'm not certain that he chose the time for that specific purpose. I suppose one could make an argument to that effect. But what we do know is that he didn't consult us at all. He didn't try to consult us. And I suspect there is not a member of the United States Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives who wouldn't have either remained in Washington or come back from their home district. You know, we're not on vacation. We're working in our home states, in our home state offices.
Right.
We would have gladly come back immediately at the drop of a hat. But not one word came from this president.
Is he awaiting a controversy when he returns? Earlier today, Speaker Boehner sent him a letter saying, I'm not going to second-guess you militarily, but I am going to second-guess you constitutionally and legally. We were around and you could have told us. Your colleague John Cornyn, a senator from Texas, used the potted plant phrase that I used earlier. When you all return to Washington in a week, is the president on the hot seat?
Yes, he is very much on the hot seat, and I personally will make sure that he's there.
All right. Senator Mike Lee, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.